We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We're recording on a Tuesday morning as usual, so there's been one evening of NHL playoffs. It's that time of year. That's pretty much all I'm going to be watching for the next while. So don't expect too much other stuff in the what we watch section from Rob, except for NHL
hear Rob
playoffs.
talk about slap shots and
Could be
hat tricks.
The 4 games
and,
last night,
body checks.
They were all good. All 4 games were really good. So this is going to be a fun playoffs as far as I can tell.
Oh, is it? Well, it's not the season. It's the playoffs. Is that?
It's the playoffs.
Okay.
They're playing for the Stanley Cup.
Apparently, the Rays, Tampa Bay Rays. I think that's what they're called. The baseball team.
Baseball team. Yes.
I understand that they're trying to make baseball more interesting or exciting.
Well, they've got the pitch clock now.
Yeah, whatever. They could play with a flaming ball on a field filled with kerosene. I still wouldn't watch that game. I hate baseball so much.
Well, what was the Futurama? The Blurns ball, was it?
I watch cycling racing sometimes, and I've been watching it a lot lately because my wife wants to talk through literally anything I put on the screen. So I'm like, if you're gonna talk, let's talk through something I don't have to. The most boring sport. I mean, it is way worse than golf. It is way worse. Like golf, they can cut from person to person. They show them doing something. In cycling, it's just like, here's a bunch of dudes pedaling for like 6 hours.
What's the one where it is just
somebody
an oval?
Falls down.
The bike racing
that?
In just an oval? That's even
no, not the oval.
Even less interesting.
Like, the less interesting ones. I think the oval stuff is a little bit more exciting because it makes you dizzy.
More potential for crashes, I suppose.
I don't know. So yes. Anyways, but I'm glad. I like hockey. I do like hockey. I like.
I mean, I'm legally required to. You know, I don't have any choice in the matter.
Apparently, it's America's pastime, and I missed the boat. I missed the memo. I've been to games. I lived near San Francisco, and I saw the A's, the Oakland A's, or I don't know what they call them.
We're switching back and forth between sports here without specifying, but okay.
Anyways, yes, and I'm supposed to like that game. Okay. I'm supposed to like it. The guy down the street from me was a professional player. I used to play with his daughter when I was a kid, and couldn't just can't care about baseball. So let's hear the last movie Rob is going to watch until the playoffs
for a little while, most likely. Yeah, I was thinking I was going to get out to the theater at some point, but no, it just didn't happen. So I did watch The Menu, which is Anya Taylor-Joy, Ralph Fiennes, Nicholas Hoult.
It's that one where the high-end chef invites a bunch of people to an island. And
that is correct. Yep.
Somebody gets on the boat or whatever and it's not supposed to be there, and then it's from their point of view.
Yeah,
right?
The original guest did not come, so a replacement guest was brought along, and tension and uncomfortableness ensues. Overall, I very much enjoyed this movie. Now, you just have to very quickly go, you know what? If you're looking for realism, I could believe this would actually happen. That's not this movie. That's not the point of this movie. It has
that's almost every movie.
Sure. Well, no, I mean, some are very much this could happen in the real world. I mean, this is a highly stylized theme, is just put right out there and spoken. Yes. Overt, over the top type of movie. I don't know if you'd call it I guess it's like a thriller. It's a tense movie. It's all about being tense.
I have not seen it. I have seen reviews of it, and my understanding is this is the movie for people who have ever been mad at other people for being critical of them.
There's some of that.
I don't know if that's true or not. Like I said, I haven't seen it. I would like to see it.
Honestly, this is a movie I think I will enjoy even more on second watch if I ever find time to watch it a second time. Simply because if you are on the first watch just following along with the plot as it's presented in the movie, there's a lot of where you go, why are they still there, or why did they come back, or why are they putting up with any of this? Like, there's a lot of that, and you're meant to ask that question. That's not a mistake. You're meant to. It all is explained. So don't worry that this is going to be some so high artsy-fartsy thing that you're never even going to put together why any of this took place. No, all is explained, and that's why I think actually going back and watching it a second time, it might be even more fun. So I give it a thumbs up. I think it was a very entertaining movie. Anya Taylor-Joy, I don't know what was going on with the lighting in this movie, because she normally is stunning, and she's I mean, obviously just her normal looks, she's still, you know, stunning on the screen, but there's something really weird where, like, her makeup is, like, really obvious, and I don't think it was meant to be. Like, it just looks like her skin is just caked. It's really weird. I'm like, normally you could do a little better with the lighting and cinematography than to just have that be...
Somebody wasn't sure that they were actually be shooting in 4K, and they thought, the camera will hide it. Something
was strange on that front. Like, it stood out. I noticed it, which is unusual. Wasn't like I was specifically looking for. I was just like,
right.
Okay, like, yeah, normally people's skin doesn't look like it was literally painted on with a brush, and that wasn't like part of her character or something. So I don't know what was going on with that. It was a bit weird.
That would have been my second guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but Ralph Fiennes was sort of deliciously not outright evil, but menacing. I'll say menacing as the extremely high end chef who's running this place. Yeah.
Ralph Fiennes, I think, can play a wide range of characters, but he
can.
Particularly does, like, I am going to do something uncomfortable to you very well.
He can do that steely-eyed look, which is like, will put you in your place, which is a whole bunch of this movie. Can
you imagine being his kid and, like, disappointing him? Oh, my goodness.
And Nicholas Hoult was a blast, because, I mean, he's the absolute sycophant character to this guy, and that was a lot of fun. So, big thumbs up for me. Absolutely check out the menu if you haven't already seen it. And there you go.
All right, so I watched Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, okay.
I will say, I have had this movie for 2 weeks.
Okay, I kind of forgot you hadn't seen it, and then, yeah, there we go.
I pre-ordered it. I ordered it before it came out on Ultra HD Blu-ray. I ordered it for Amazon, got a little bit of a discount, and I got it in the mail, and I was like, let's watch it this week, and everybody said, yeah. And then we didn't.
Okay.
And then we didn't again, and last week when we finally watched it. And we were supposed to watch it with the whole family that still lives here. So my 19-year-old son, of course, is off at college, but the other two sons are here. My 13-year-old son was camping, and my wife was like, let's just watch it anyways. I was like, fine.
Yeah,
so we watched it anyways.
You can always watch it again. So
that's right. Not exactly appropriate for 13-year-old boys, but
there are definitely some stuff in there.
There was a scene in there that made my wife ask whether or not my 17-year-old son should have been in there. And I was like, that boy is it's far too late for that boy. Okay? Yes. That boy is...
The internet exists. He's seen such things, I'm sure.
Anyway, it's a great movie. We spent the whole time thinking the projector was something was wrong with the projector because it's so washed out. The movie itself is very... It has that sort of 1980s film-esque quality to it that I felt was very dim. Like the whole movie was dim. And that could be because I'm watching it on the 4K disc on a 1080p projector. And
I wonder if there was a little bit of HDR to SDR conversion. Not because when I watched it,
Oh, you know what? The other thing it could be, too, is I think I switched my HDR to SDR settings when I was doing a review a while back, and I might not have reset them because I don't use that thing very often. So that could also be it. I'll have to go and look.
Yeah, like it wasn't the most stunning HDR or anything. I think they basically mastered it to SDR levels, but I don't recall it particularly looking washed out in any way. So
my wife was like, oh, that was a really interesting movie, and I feel like there's a lot of layers there. I need to watch it again so I can get everything. I'm like, I don't think there's that many layers. I mean, I feel like that was a pretty straightforward story, but
there was plenty of like literal exposition. This is what's going on.
This is what's happening. This is the bad guy, and this is the bad guy. Did you not catch it? There they are.
There you
go. But we've talked on this podcast about how my wife, I am pretty sure, has undiagnosed ADHD, and it shows up very, very strongly through her ability to pay attention to a movie. It was a good movie. It was very good. If you said which one was better of the multiverse movies that are out there, which one was better? I mean, you could make a very strong argument that this was the better of the two. Sure. I'm not saying this is the one I am going to watch more than the Doctor Strange movie for my own personal historical reasons, the comic book movies have a draw for me. But I would not disagree with you if you said that this was the better of the two movies. And of course, Michelle Yeoh is always great.
Yes, she's fantastic.
I would watch her read the newspaper.
And I loved Ki Hui Kwan in it. I thought he was excellent. Waymond.
His voice is way too similar to him. Like, it so threw me off the first time he opened his mouth and spoke, and that's literally the first time I've seen him speak since one of those movies. I've heard him speak since one of the the Indiana Jones or the Goonies and stuff like that. He sounds, I mean, as you would expect, he still sounds the same, but like slightly deeper. But I kind of expected him to sound totally different. Like but the minute he opened his mouth, I was like, short round. So good movie. All right. Okay. So people get mad when we spend too much time on this, and I could geek out over this stuff right now.
And we did have lots left over from last week. Although
I know, and I did want to mention
somewhat good. We didn't get a gazillion questions this week, so we should be okay.
Yes. So I did mention Willow last week, the series Willow, and I had watched 3 or 4 episodes at that point, and I've watched some more, and I want to modify my initial reaction to this series. It's bad. It is. Okay. I just want to say that.
Right.
I want to say that. I want to say that it is not good. All right. But it is so entertaining.
Oh.
it's
so it's
not good in the way that like a D&D campaign is not good. Like when you're sitting around with your friends and your characters are making like references that they shouldn't be able to make because it's not appropriate for settings, but it doesn't matter because it still makes you laugh. Yeah, that's I have warmed to this series more than I can tell you.
I don't know if that's intentional, if that's what they were going for. But
I don't know what they were going for. I will say that even my criticisms of Warwick, what's his
Warwick Davis.
Warwick Davis. Like they finally got him in the scene where he's like drunk or high or something. They're on some sort of drug, sort of medieval whatever magical drug, and I was like, oh, there he is. Now I got it. And his character sort of like, I think they're starting to write him a little bit better and give him a little bit better things to do. And everybody's getting, but there's like too much drama, but also it's all very stupid, and nobody does anything that makes any sense.
Should people honestly be making time in their schedule to watch this, or you've just given yourself over to it?
No, I'm not done with the first season yet, but I will tell you, if you're like episode 3 going, man, this is not great. It's not going to get better, but I feel like you're going to like it more, if that makes sense.
It's the Willow break-in period.
I honestly cannot explain to you my emotions about this stupid show, which I feel like I wanted to like after I saw the villains, and that was like, ooh, it's going to go dark. And then it went, nah, we're not doing dark.
Yeah.
But the villains are still like super weird, man. I mean, they are bad. But I don't know. I'm going to continue. This is going to be an ongoing saga with you guys. So I will say, too, that I did localize my subs for the first time ever.
Okay.
Which, if you know anything about me, and then like, wait a second, you can't localize subs when they're playing as low as they are. You're right, you can't, unless you're watching not from last episode of Mandalorian. If you're listening to this podcast on the day it was released, so not the one that just released on Wednesday, but the one before that, where
that was
the
episode
Mandalorian
8?
Ships goes over the top of the city of wherever that city is. I can't remember whatever planet it's on. It goes over the top. Yep. Both my subs started bottoming out.
Wow.
I mean, just like clanged so bad, I thought that I had found a new like something was vibrating in my theater, so I rewound it and went to the back of the room, and I was like, that's coming from the sub. And I reached down and I tried to see if I literally thought that the driver was moving inside the
right.
The screws had come loose, and the whole driver was banging up and down. I was like, oh, that's not good. So I went back to my seat to grab the remote, and I got further through the scene than I had the first time when I noticed the sound. And I realized that I was thinking to myself, I'm going to have to call SVS and get another sub sent out or get a repair or something like that. And as I grabbed the remote, I realized my front sub was also doing it.
Wow, yeah.
But it was just doing it at different times or whatever because of it flying over the top of the room from the back to the front or whatever. I don't know why that would have made any difference, but
you might have some slightly different phase settings or whatever between your two subs.
Anyway, so the front sub started going nuts, and I was like, okay, well, turn it down. And I did not. I went back to the volume because I usually watch Disney Plus at around anywhere from -12 to -7, depending on the show.
Which,
it's usually
being Disney Plus, is more like -22 to -17 because everything on there is mastered to a lower volume.
Right. And I was actually lower than that. I was like 13, -13.5 when this happened. And I was, and I have noticed that on the Xbox One X, whatever the heck
Series.
I have.
You've got a Series
X.
Yeah. You're up to date.
That Disney seems to have gotten louder.
Oh, okay.
So I do think that that's part of it, but it was not like I was not blowing the doors off the place. I was just,
you certainly weren't up at 0 on the master dial.
So if you experience that too, please let me know because I'm gonna write an article about it. If I can get enough people to say that, oh yeah, dude, so that seems nuts.
Weird.
I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I've watched Dune at reference level, and it didn't do this. And that's got insane bass in it. So I don't know what to tell you guys, but...
Well, all right. Very quickly before we move on, just Picard Season 3. It's supposed to be the final season of Star Trek Picard. So I was going to wait until the last episode to give my thoughts on that. But I just wanted to mention, like, it's so much fan service this season that it has crossed over from being like, oh, that's fan service, to just being like you just got to go with it. Like, I think they did a great job of just being like, no, we're not just going to do fan service to the point that it like kind of makes you roll your eyes or grow. We're going to go way past that point and like come all the way back around to like it being awesome again. So kudos to them for being like, we're not just going to go for it. We're going to like bash you over the head with it to the point that you're going to like it again. So I have quite enjoyed the last few episodes of Picard.
Yeah, and somebody could actually have the exact same reaction I've had to Willow to that, to what you just said. Yep. So, it's so bad. There's so much fan service that now I think
that's the way to do it. Way to do it. I give them credit.
All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. And go to avrant.com and find our old episodes, as well as our show notes, our Flickr albums, and links to everything. Contact Rob directly, rob@avrant.com. Facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant. Rob directly is rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @firstreflect. I'm tom@avrant.com. Let's get to this thing.
All right.
Got some listeners of the week. We want to thank our 137 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon's a service where you can sign up to become a contributing listener to the podcast. Every month, they'll take some money from you and give most of it to us. So we want to thank Alvin and our 137 patrons over at patreon.com.
That is right. It's patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to go there directly, sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, minimum of $1 a month. And so a big thank you for the financial support from our 137 patrons. Alvin, thank you for being one of them.
We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Dan, Joseph, Adam, Nick, Alvin, again, who hasn't written us in a while, but he's still been watching, listening every week. He got to a point where he was just enjoying his setup, but now he's back with some questions that we'll try to get to below. Will says we've never steered him wrong over the last 10 years. Thanks to us, he's purchased 2 BenQ projectors and Rant's receiver, Panasonic UB420. 420.
God, as if we need more of that.
Oh my God! I have had too much caffeine. When I start making that joke, that's when you know.
Yeah, well, when rocket launches are being scheduled on a date because it lines up with 420, as opposed to when it makes sense to launch the rocket based on atmospheric conditions.
I don't understand why they're going to do it on 420 and not what is it? May the 4th. You got to do May the 4th.
That. It's not his thing.
He's got SVS subs and most recently a Fosse amplifier.
There we go.
And Ilango. So Dan, Joseph, Adam, Nick, Alvin, Will, and Ilango, thank you very much for thanking us.
Yes, I'll say the names one more time. So it came from me, Dan, Joseph, Adam, Nick, Alvin, Will, and Ilango. Thank you very much for the notes of encouragement. They're very much appreciated. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
Okay, in the news, since we record this on Tuesdays, we're a bit late in mentioning this news. So you've probably already heard that. Starting May 23rd, HBO Max and Discovery Plus streaming services will merge. The new name will be, and I want to tell you that I heard people complaining about it, but did not read it far enough to figure out what the new name was. So this is the first time I'm seeing it.
Oh, okay.
It will be Max.
Yeah.
Just Max.
That's it. Not Max Plus, the way it should be. Just Max.
It should be a lowercase I with a Max.
No, then it would be IMAX. That'd be a problem.
Well, it wouldn't be iMac. It'd be IMAX, and that would, good luck, Apple suing them for that.
No, but there's also IMAX theaters. So
oh, that's true, but it's a lowercase I. It's totally spelled differently.
Max plus I. There we go. That'd get them all in there.
Discovery Plus will actually still be available as a separate service, staying exactly the way it is, but HBO Max is going away, replaced by the new Max app. It's gonna be the logo takes up your whole phone. It's the Max. It's very big. They promise will deliver simpler navigation, including genre hubs, think Disney Plus's layout, and an enhanced user experience, i.e. crashes.
Well, i.e. they're going to use Disney Plus or Discovery Plus's technology because that's actually been more stable than HBO Max's. So now that it's David Zaslav, former CEO of Just Discovery, and then he's come in, everything's going to be his way. The way they did it must be better than the way Warner Brothers did it. That's right.
Off my lawn. Existing HBO Max subscribers will continue to have their current plan features, which will be like 4K HDR downloads and Atmos at the current $16 a month price for the next 6 months. They'll simply be gaining Discovery Plus's content and the new Max app interface. Max app. Box. Oh. But after 6 months, and for any new user signing up starting May 23rd, there are new price tiers to be aware of. The Max Ad Lite. This is going to be hard to say eventually.
I mean, it's just
I mean, right now.
I wouldn't have written it unless that is what they called it. I'm sorry, Max Ad Lite.
Max Ad Lite with
Light
the L-I-T-E.
L-I-T-E. Yes, because we can't even just spell it correctly, but there you go.
$10 a month or $100 a year, 2 simultaneous streams, no downloads, 1080p and 5.1 audio only. Max Ad Free,
yes,
which is $16 a month or $150 a year, 2 simultaneous streams, 30 downloads, 30 individual episodes?
30. I mean, that all they put was 30 downloads per month. I don't know if that means individual episodes or movies.
Oh, that's per month. The downloads are per month.
Yeah, it's per month, yeah.
Okay. 1080p and 5.1 audio only, and Max Ultimate ad-free. Max! I don't know.
But I mean, they couldn't just call it Max, could they? So they had to put Ultimate in there. Yes.
Ultimate Max. Max right. Ultimate. That's stupid. $20 a month or $200 a year, 4 simultaneous streams, 100 downloads, 4K HDR, Dolby Atmos, and Dolby Vision and Atmos.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So even under Max Ultimate, you're limited to 100 downloads a month. It's not unlimited downloads. So I think they'll have to bring in another tier of, Max Elite or,
Elite
Max,
Ultimate?
Max Omega. I don't know. Yeah. Unlimited downloads. It's going to be the other thing. It's got to be on there.
Somebody else should start a service that's just called Omega.
But yeah, I mean, they just
Omega Light, Omega Medium, Omega Max.
They took a look at Netflix. They said, "Oh, hey, you're ripping everybody off just to get 4K and HDR and Atmos, so we can do that too. We can rip people off too. Look at us." Enjoy your Max, everyone. I don't have access to it in Canada. All the HBO content comes through Crave up here. Crave isn't the greatest service, but I mean, at least it isn't this.
I don't understand how I can live in this room constantly, but only when I'm doing a podcast will there be a bug.
Of course. They came in to see what you have to say, Tom.
It's all the carbon dioxide.
What
are you two doing? Settle down.
Tom's talking to his dogs.
All right, this comes from Infinite Gary. At the 100th Annual NAB Show, which is the National Association of Broadcasters, SMPTE, or the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, held a presentation to outline the most recent work to create and maintain a technical blueprint for consistent cinema HDR.
They don't want to be beholden to just Dolby and their Dolby cinemas. They're like, look, all cinemas should be able to, at least at some point in the future, show HDR. Let's come up with a framework for that so that the people creating the content will know how the heck it's going to be shown, at least if people abide by the specifications.
Right. So, yes.
Yeah. Makes sense.
That makes sense.
Very logical thing to do.
Yeah. So the DCI, or the Digital Cinema Initiative, Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, the American Society of Cinematographers, and the National Association of Theater Owners. Boo. The last one.
I mean, hey, you didn't have them. It could be kind of tough.
Have all been involved behind the scenes to try and create a consistent cinema HDR canvas that filmmakers can target for theatrical presentations. The proposed specs are predominantly based on current cinema laser projectors. There are no provisions for lamp-based projectors, so upgrade or die.
Pretty much.
But there is an addendum specifically for direct view cinema displays, such as Samsung's Onyx, which is the wall thing.
That's right.
And LG and Sony's micro LED display. So there's going to be other stuff.
Which
they're working on it.
Yeah, essentially the direct view displays, the modular micro LED displays that all of those companies have now, they're brighter. They're brighter than your laser cinema projectors. And black can be true black. So they've got an addendum on there to basically say, okay, if this is the theater it's going to be shown in, then we can widen the specifications a bit. They did not publicly release the specifications. It's not done yet. This entire initiative is not completed yet. It's not formalized yet, but they're just talking about it. Kind of interesting. It was at the National Association of Broadcasters, but regardless, that's where they did this presentation. SMPTE did, and I find that interesting. It's needed. You don't want to have to be like literally every theater. It has to be a separate export when they're creating the content. You kind of want to have some standardization across the industry. So it all makes sense.
Not only that, like you said, when you're mastering something, you want to be able to say, this is what it's going to look like in, a theater doesn't have HDR. This is what it's going to look like at a theater that has HDR that's up to the right specifications. This will look like,
because otherwise you end up with
IMAX or whatever.
Shazam! Fury of the Gods, like I talked about last week, where I'm like, I'm sure this looks great in a Dolby Cinema, which I'm convinced is where they mastered the thing. I'm like, for all the other theaters, that's a murky, horrible-looking mess right during the climax of the movie. So I am all for standardizing what the theaters are going to show when it comes to HDR. They're years behind what we've had at home already. Makes sense that it's about time this gets formalized.
And then we get to have people argue that, their displays don't match those criteria perfectly. Therefore,
I mean, I've got to think the Mad VR guys are like licking their chops trying to get into the actual like commercial cinemas. They might. They've been gung ho about all this stuff, and obviously the price points aren't going to be a prohibitive for when it comes to commercial applications. So who knows? Maybe it'll be in there, and then they can really claim, yes, you are seeing at home on your projector what was seen in the cinema. They're going to love that. So I'm sure they're all over it.
Got some comments here. Joe was recently at the Portland airport. He was excited to find a theater they have installed there in partnership with Portland's historic nonprofit theater. The airport theater was designed and installed by the Erskine Group, and they use it to show locally made short films. It's a 138-inch Stewart screen with a Barco residential projector and an Atmos sound system using turn-off processing and triad speakers. They have signs up to describe the equipment being used. Seems like great marketing, no? I mean, it looks. They have terrible seats, but that's okay.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. The seats are old school. Just the bottom folds up. I mean, look absolutely like theater seats, but that everybody remembers. But it's not tiered. There's no risers even. So I was a little bit surprised at that, to be honest. But it was
how they make sure you know where the speakers are by making the grills a different color, or the speakers not have grills like the rear speakers that we can see here.
They very much prioritize being able to fit more people as opposed to making it look more like a home theater. But I mean, it does certainly appear to be acoustic treatments on the walls, which is nice to see in any sort of setup that isn't a commercial movie theater. Made it feel very much like a home system. So absolutely. If this gets some people, because I mean, they put the placards up on the walls to say, here's the equipment that's being used. A little bit, not exactly like a spec sheet or anything, but just a little description of what's in there. So hey, if that gets some people to be like, that's actually a thing I could build at home, then cool, good on it.
Yeah, I understand the idea that they want to make sure they can get as many people in here as possible, but I do kind of wish that they had taken a more this looks like your living room
right. Yeah, a little bit,
so that people could envision this in their houses.
Truly envisioned it in their house, absolutely. More just a scaled down version of it type of
I
thing.
am certainly not going to thumb my nose at this. So
this is great. Yeah.
Getting to the questions here. Nick is thinking about getting an Apple Watch. Most people are expecting the new Series 9 to be released in September alongside the new iPhone 15 models, as has traditionally been Apple's timeline. But this year, they don't seem to be any rumors about a new Apple Watch Series 9 features or design changes. Does Apple usually announce a new watch features well in advance of the September product release? He doesn't want to wait if there aren't going to be any big changes this year. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, the best I can tell you, they do have WWDC, the Worldwide Developers Conference, that is in June, where they almost always talk about the OSs, the operating systems, including Watch OS. So in terms of if there's going to be any new features on the software side, you only have to wait until June to find out about that. So maybe that's worth waiting for. But traditionally, the actual hardware, normally there's a bunch of leaks, sometimes several months in advance, but in terms of official announcement of the hardware design, they usually wait until the September announcement and then say, like, you can pre-order now or you can pre-order next week, and then it's coming out in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It's usually a fairly short timeline between when they actually officially announce the hardware and all of its changes versus when you can pre-order it. So I don't know. Like, if you're like, I could use this watch right now, it is usually the case that if there's a big change going on, because there are so many companies involved, like including all the accessory companies and the parts suppliers and all that type of stuff, usually there are leaks that are coming out like right from the beginning of the year if there's big changes. It's been typically the case that when there aren't very many rumors going on, it's usually one of the years where essentially nothing is really changing, like drastically changing, at least on the hardware side. So I would probably say wait till June, see what they say about the software. If there's some new feature coming to Watch Series 9 that isn't going to be available on Watch Series 8 on the software side, you'll know by June. If there's nothing really there, then I think this is probably going to be one of those years where there isn't a gigantic hardware change. But I mean, I could be wrong, caveat emptor, but that's typically been the way it goes.
And let's just make sure it's abundantly clear, we have no insight whatsoever.
We have no insider info, nothing like that.
Nothing like
purely basing it on history.
I am of the opinion that, generally speaking, you should just buy the thing you want when you're ready to buy it, and not always try to wait until the next, to get the brand new thing as soon as it comes out. But
it's just sometimes there are years where it's a big change, and you're kind of like, if you buy the thing in the summer, you're like, kind of wish I'd wait until September. Like, I can see people thinking that way, absolutely, when it comes to Apple.
I can understand that too. But
yeah,
whatever. Because I am the type of person that will keep procrastinating. Let's put it this way: I've had new cycling shoes in my Amazon checkout thing for like 6 months now, and I'm still not buying them.
Honestly, I will just say Apple Watch hasn't really changed that much ever. like there definitely have been refinements. It's gotten nicer through the various series, but like really, you go back to even the original Apple Watch versus today's, it's like it's not a gigantic change, to be honest, on the hardware side. No.
So Nick practices deadlifting at the gym, and he's worked his way up to the point where he's now lifting enough weight that he cannot use rubber mat pads for setting the weight bar back down. He has to use the iron plates on the floor now. I did not know I know nothing about deadlifting. So I don't know what this means, but I imagine it means something.
It's got to be like a structural thing, you got to have iron.
I guess you destroy the pads. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
You got to spread the weight out over the pad, or they'll destroy the pads, or cut the pads, or people get mad at you, or they ostracize you from the gym. I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of hazing thing. Anyways, and he's noticed that after a workout, his ears are ringing sometimes for the entire rest of the day. So he's worried it'll cause hearing damage. I correct you, my man. If your ears are ringing, you are hearing damage. You are experiencing it. That's what the ringing is. That is the death of some of the little parts of your.
You are right to be concerned. Definitely. Yes.
And he wants to use hearing protection. Well, that ship is I'm going to say it hasn't. Well, no. Yes, you should definitely start doing that right away.
Definitely is.
Because there can't be any cords or wires to get in the way, and they need to stay in for 30 to 60 minutes for a 30 to 60 minute workout. He still wants to be able to make out what people are saying to him, and he doesn't want to use the typical disposable earplugs. that's definitely what I would do. I'm going to be dead honest.
You just use the foam, the
I
disposable
would just use the foam earplugs
or the silicone. The silicone earplugs work very, very well, but you would have a tough time making out people talking to you with the silicone earplugs.
Well, and also, I mean, if it were me, I'm just like, just put them in where you're... Are you really talking to people as you're doing the deadlift part of your workout?
Well, I mean, if you've got a spotter in that, I can see it. You need to be able to communicate.
I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know anything about deadlifting. Anyways, he wouldn't mind if the hearing protection could also double as wireless earbuds, but he wouldn't want to spend more than $100. I mean, I think you should. I think your whole question up to this point was completely reasonable until you put a price point on a thing that you have no idea if it even exists. Like if there could be like a perfect solution out for you that could, block out just the noise of what's going on, also give you tunes, and then allow you to hear people talking around you perfectly, but it's going to cost $101. You're like, not for me. I'm out.
Well, I mean, I think he's just saying don't go recommending some $500 thing,
Well, I mean, I think that if there was a $500 thing, I would want to know about it.
That's true.
If I were him, but by setting the price point on there as some sort of arbitrary number that he's just decided, literally picked out of thin air as being this number is too high. It's not too high. I bet you spend more than that on gym shoes, right? But yet, you want your earphones, you want your in-ear monitors to do all this stuff and protect your hearing, but it can't cost more than your gym shoes. I don't know about that. I don't know if you're really thinking with all the brain cells there. But I will say, as far as hearing protection goes, it's very important. Yes. I completely agree that if you're experiencing any sort of ringing, you definitely need to do something. Any in-ear headphone that fits into your ear canal, as an in-ear monitor will block sound coming in.
Yeah, I mean just by virtue of
the nature of the beast there.
Blocking your ear a bit.
And some of them have the little foam ear, what do they call those? Like the ear pieces or whatever they are.
Yeah, the tips that you're using.
The ear tips, that will do an even better job of making sure that there's no leakage. I've reviewed a whole bunch of earphones over at AV Gadgets.
Yeah.
All of these would do something. Will it do it? I mean, and you can set almost every earphone these days, especially in-ear monitors, wireless in-ear monitors, which is what you're asking for, has an app or has the ability to be put into transient mode or transparent mode. But they would not do a super good job at keeping out sounds that are very loud and piercing, like you dropping these weights. Because I will tell you right now that, because I use my Space A40s, which are my favorite of all the in-ear monitors that I've used, and they're under $100. They're $79 right now on Amazon. I just checked. They're fantastic at staying in, and they click all of your buttons, but you couldn't use transparent mode because those loud sounds that of you dropping the weights. I'd bet my entire fortune, of which there is very little of, but I'd bet it all on the fact that it would actually make those sounds louder. It would actually amplify them.
But in terms of acting as some hearing protection, not in transparent mode, and acting as completely wireless Bluetooth earphones, those could certainly work. The Space A40s, those are from Anchor Soundcore, if you're looking for the brand. So that pretty much checks all the boxes. I was hoping Tom would have that because I couldn't remember offhand the brand and model, but I knew he had talked about ones like that before. So that's certainly worth keeping in mind. Checks all the boxes you were talking about. Another option as far as earbuds go, I'm relying basically on reviews on this because this isn't the brand I would go to first, but I mean, it's been a long time since Beats by Dre. I mean, they've gone through, now they're owned by Apple, and there's been a lot of redesigns going on. So the Beats Fit Pro come highly recommended multiple places, but The Verge has actually been doing a really good job on reviewing earphones, in my opinion, lately. So, they talk about the sound quality, the hearing protection that they provide, and particularly the fit. These don't use sort of a wrap around the ear design that could maybe get caught on something. These use sort of like a wing that fits inside the crevice of your ear, and they say hold things really, really securely. Good long battery life on them too, and a transparency mode if you need that feature as well. So That checks all the boxes, but they're $150, so they're almost twice the price of those Soundcore, the Space A40s. So the other thing I wanted to mention, I think you should probably pick up a pair of these regardless of whether you get earbuds for this purpose or not, that just to have the ear plugs, just passive earplugs. These don't play any music or anything, but from Etymotic. Etymotic is absolutely the place I always point everybody to get their hearing protection. The ones that you'd be getting these days cost $25. They're the ER20s. That's the modern design. No, I like this design that they're using now because there is really nothing sticking out, protruding from your ears. I mean, there's a little thing that you can grab on to remove them, but it's not like coming out past the pinna of your ear like their old design used to kind of just be like a stick that protruded far enough that you could definitely brush past your ears and knock it out or catch it on something. These new ones, fit right flush to the pinna of your ear. They're fantastic. Musicians use them all the time because they are pretty darn frequency neutral. They don't really change the frequency response. They just uniformly lower everything by about 17 to 20 decibels. That's almost exactly what you were asking for. Protects your hearing without changing the way things around you sound. I love using them if I go to IMAX or a live concert or something like that. I have them and I use them and I will
I've used something similar, an older version of this that I got years and years ago.
The ones that had the little sticks that stuck out, but it was the same type of performance.
Yeah. I used to wear them on a motorcycle too when I would ride my motorcycle.
So the picture that I showed a cord going between them. That's completely optional. That's just there in case you want to be able to drape it around your neck. You do not have to attach the cord. They can go completely without anything protruding from yours. So highly recommend those Etymotic ER20s.
So I think what you really are asking for is, can I get an in-ear monitor that will play the music, block just the sounds, and then also allow in other people's voices at the same time? And I think the answer to that question, unless there's a very specific sound frequency that this is the sound frequency that I need to block, the answer to that question is no.
Yeah,
it does not exist at any cost.
The Beats that I mentioned, or the Soundcore Space A40s that Tom mentioned, they would just be the same as ear plugs. They plug your ears. They will help protect your hearing, but it would be. People's voices will definitely be muffled when you have them.
Yeah, you cannot put them in transparent mode and then have them still do all the stuff that you want it to do.
But if the only time you need to be able to hear somebody is you've already put the weight down, your hands are free, you can touch one of them and activate transparent mode. If that's the way that you're using them, then that could work.
Yeah, I have a feeling that...
I don't think so. I think it's a spotter. That's my guess.
I just get the Etymotics and call it a day.
Yeah.
John is about fed up. Ever since he got a 65-inch LG G2 OLED, he's had nothing but technical problems. We've been chatting back and forth about his Xbox Series X recently, and he's got his gear about 40 feet away from the TV, so he's using a fiber optic ultra high-speed HDMI cable. This is a setup where his Xbox keeps defaulting to only outputting 640 by 480 resolution, and the only fix has been plugging the Xbox directly into his OLED using the HDMI cable that came with the Xbox, and then hot swapping the fiber optic HDMI cable and lugging the Xbox back to its usual location 40 feet away. Every so often, the Xbox gets stuck back at 640 to 480 resolution again, so it's been a big hassle. At this point, he spent about $200 on two different HDMI fiber optic cables, and the AVRant and the
Rui Pro, I think. I don't know how it's actually pronounced. RUI Pro, Rui Pro, I think.
Whatever. And we've talked about potentially using an HD Fury, but he doesn't want to spend that much when he really shouldn't have to.
Yeah, which is true.
I'm not saying you're not right, and I'm also not. I mean, we've been absolutely convinced that it has something to do with the cable, and because you can fix it by moving and changing to a different cable. I must say this. Anytime you're having a problem with an Xbox and another thing, never rule out the Xbox as being the problem, as far as I'm concerned. I'm very convinced that Microsoft's boxes are cursed by an elder demon.
I've had people write into us, both the AVRant and the Rui Pro, using an Xbox Series X with an LG OLED, and they aren't having this problem. So... there is something coming up. I have some suspicions at work.
Okay, I suspect the devil. His AV receiver is I almost said Xbox Denon X3600H, and his other sources are an Apple TV 4K and a Sony Blu-ray player. They're both plugged into the Denon, and he's got his copper high-speed HDMI cable running from the Denon to the TV. Yeah. The Apple TV 4K works totally fine, no problems there. But with the Sony Blu-ray player, there's a picture but no sound. I just wrote an article literally this morning about this.
Okay.
He took that Blu-ray player and plugged it into a different TV in a different room that worked fine, picture and sound, but then he plugged it straight into the OLED, and it had picture but no sound again. It's got to be this darn G2 OLED that's causing all the problems, right?
I wouldn't go to that conclusion just yet. No.
Yeah, I wrote an article this morning about HDMI, like long HDMI cables, and having issues with them, and it doesn't have to be long HDMI cables. That's just the thing. They can.
And I mean, in this case, it's a Sony Blu-ray player that's plugged directly into the AV receiver first.
Yeah.
The picture is making its way to the TV 40 feet away, but the sound is not there for some strange reason that's going on. Yeah, so I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that it's your G2 OLED. I mean, you just said that the Apple TV works fine, and it's got the same connection path. Yeah. So that just doesn't line up. At this point, I mean, this ends up going into his second question too, but I strongly suspect we have some HDMI CEC nuttiness going on here. Yeah, because
I think so too.
Yeah, honestly, why don't we just do the second question, because it all ties together. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Second question: he has to plug the Xbox Series X directly into the OLED since it's Denon. X3600H cannot pass through 4K 120 and VRR and all that. Mm-hmm. So that's what the fiber optic ultra high speed cable is supposed to be for. And now he's finding that if he tries to switch to using his Blu-ray player, as soon as he hits any button on the remote, the TV switches inputs back to the Xbox.
Yeah.
Just wants his home theater to work. What's going on? Dude, the minute that you said that, like I read this question earlier, the minute you said that, I'm like, you've got HDMI CEC on somewhere.
That's gotta be now. Now.
And the minute you're having any problems and HDMI CEC rears its ugly head at some point in the signal chain, you're like, that's the problem. There it is. Yeah.
So here's some of the big problem. Now, what he's saying, I have to have a connection that goes straight from my Xbox to the TV because my AV receiver doesn't have HDMI 2.1. So if I want 4K 120 and I want VRR and I want Dolby Vision at 120 hertz, because these are things I paid for when I got my G2 and my Xbox Series X, there has to be a direct connection from the Xbox to the TV. You're spot on with that. And then you're saying, okay, I still want surround sound. So I'm going to use the HDMI ARC or eARC connection in this case to send the audio from the TV back downstream to the AV receiver. And eARC is absolutely supposed to be able to do that. And then that means I already have a connection that goes from my AV receiver to the eARC port of my television. And I've got my 4K 60 sources, my Apple TV 4K, my Sony Blu-ray player. Those plug into the AV receiver as you would expect, and they're able to send their signal, the picture, to that eARC port on my LG, and I'm able to, all of that shit where all the connections sound absolutely correct. That is 100% the way I would hook everything up myself.
Yes.
Now, HDMI CEC, the easy thing to say is just turn all of it off. And that is sometimes easier said than done because every brand has their own name for HDMI CEC. LG calls it SimpLink. So anything that says SimpLink in your LG TV, normally I'd say, hey, turn all that off. Denon just calls it HDMI Control, and it is under the HDMI section, which I think is under the video section of the setup menu. But everything that has to do with HDMI Control, normally I would say just turn it off. Xbox, I don't know if they have an actual... I think they actually call it HDMI CEC. I think they're one of the few things that actually labels it CEC. But Sony would call it Bravia Sync. So in your Sony Blu-ray player, it would be Bravia Sync. And Apple, I think it's just called HDMI. I think it's HDMI Sync in Apple devices. I think is the name that they used for it. That's ringing a bell. Anyways, HDMI something control sync something or other along those lines in the Apple devices. So, like I'm saying, normally my blanket advice is just turn it all of it off. However, because you do need to use eARC, the enhanced audio return channel. The LG TV won't let you turn SimpLink off. Now, one of the easy things you can do, as far as I just want this darn stuff to work, how do I even begin? The way I would begin is to turn all of it off. Turn every instance that you can find of HDMI CEC under whatever stupid name, all the ones I just outlined, turn every single part of it off as your starting point. Then, when you go into the LG TV's sound menu and you select, I want to use HDMI eARC, it should automatically prompt you to say, you have to turn SimpLink on, which is just the way LG does things. They don't let you use eARC unless HDMI CEC, which they call SimpLink, is turned on in the television. And on the Denon, of course, you will have to turn on eARC. But in the Denon, under that HDMI menu in the settings, they let you basically control each part of HDMI CEC independently. So you can turn on just ARC without turning on any of the switch my power, switch my inputs, and critically, this is going to be the big one because I think this explains what's going on with your Sony Blu-ray player getting picture but no sound, is the automatically detect when I'm using ARC. You don't have to turn that on. Okay, so this trips people up because you're probably used to, on your Denon, switching inputs, right? You're used to switching between the input that has your Sony Blu-ray player and the input that has your Apple TV. But you're saying, when I want to use the audio return channel, it normally just automatically switches to it. I turn on my Xbox, I turn on my LG TV, and my Denon automatically switches to the ARC audio, and that's just how it works. And that's the way they market it. But to avoid all of these conflicts that you're having, do what I said there, which is in the Denon's HDMI menu, turn ARC on, but nothing else, no other part of CEC. Now you have to manually select the input when you're using the ARC port, and the button to do that on your Denon's remote is called TV audio. Now it acts like any other HDMI input. It just happens to be the HDMI audio return channel that you're using when you select TV audio from that list of input buttons. So to me, that's the way I would come at this, because what you described with the Sony Blu-ray player, especially what you described with it going back to the Xbox's input automatically, that definitely 100% sounds like an HDMI CEC issue. Now, whether any of that will have any impact on the weird 640 by 480 resolution bug, I have no idea, but it's not out of the question.
I was going to say that is I would not be so. I would. First of all, I'm surprised it's happening, like full stop. But anytime something's so bizarre that no one can understand it, and then you find out that CEC is also enabled somewhere, you're like, it's probably CEC doing something weird. And because and that makes the most sense to me, because CEC negotiates every bit of the capabilities of every device within the CEC
That's
chain.
the problem. It remembers, but not very well, every device that's in your system. And HDMI CEC works pretty darn well when you have one display, one source, and maybe an AV receiver, or particularly a soundbar. If you have one TV, a soundbar, and one source, CEC works really well. You add a second source to any of that, and it can't handle it. It's like, I can work with one source. It
kind of, so what it's supposed to do is everything is supposed to say, what kind of audio can you send, or receive, right? And then it says, okay, well, this is the lowest common denominator. Well, that's the one we'll go with. And then the same thing with video resolution. What's the lowest, what video resolutions can you accept? And you find the lowest common denominator. Well, I guarantee you that 640 by 480 or whatever it is that you're talking about
that's what's going to happen.
Definitely everything can either send or receive that, guaranteed. That is literally the lowest common denominator that you can possibly get.
But
so the fact that you're getting stuck there tells me that CEC, because we never discussed this before, because
that's right. We didn't have the complete picture of the system. We only knew about the Xbox and the TV, to be honest, in the past.
And I did write an article a while back about how to ask questions online. I think maybe we should link it up here, because, and while I'm not, I just want to tell you that I'm in no way disparaging you or how you've asked this question or whatever. But a lot of people leave out information because they're like, oh, they don't want to know all of this extra stuff. I'll just tell them the stuff that they need to know. And then there's the other side of this, which is like when you go to the doctor,
right?
And in your
you leave out a bunch of symptoms.
You're like, well, if I don't tell them about this one thing that's bothering me, maybe they won't find. Maybe they'll just go away.
Right.
That sort of thing. So just give us all tell us every bit about every part about your.
And then Tom will complain about how long the question is.
I will.
When he has to read it, but nevertheless, we'll still appreciate it.
The reason I'm complaining is that Rob's not editing out the stuff that we don't need to know. That's really the problem here, is that Rob needs to.
Oh yes, I've just been doing a terrible job all these years. Gonna get fired from the podcast that pays nothing.
So, yeah, no. So we'd rather have too much information than none enough.
Sure. But I mean, I also completely understand thinking I bought a very new device. It promises all these convenience features, and it's been nothing but a headache. Is that new TV I bought just the problem? I completely get that line of thinking.
Oh, I totally
You're not out of line whatsoever. But given, particularly the one example you said, you're like, the Apple TV 4K, it's just worked. Everything's been fine. So I'm like, okay. So that tells me, okay, the TV doesn't just have some inherent technical issue. Things are working with that one source, but all the other sources have had problems. I think the common denominator has got to be HDMI CEC. So I hope you're able to work through with the instructions that were given and find some success with this.
Yes, I think so too. All right, Ilango. Half a year ago, we talked Ilango down from trying to plan for a full Atmos setup in his wide open living room, where they were still in the planning stages for a nearly whole house renovation. He wound up agreeing it made sense to save his money and effort for the dedicated home theater that will eventually get built in their basement. And for the wide open living room, he stuck with a flat panel TV with just a pair of good in-wall speakers and 1 or 2 subs. Now, 6 months into the reno and drywall's finally up, they decided to prioritize aesthetics and furniture choices in the living room. So that has led to the TV and speaker locations being higher up than he'd have them in a dedicated home theater. Basically, the middle of the TV, they're going for a 77-inch OLED, and the middle of the speakers will be 4.5 feet from the floor.
Yeah. That's not that bad.
It's
a little bit higher.
That's
maybe
not
a foot
Reddit.
Higher.
That's not Reddit approved. I'll tell you that right now.
Right.
But for like real people who sit on real chairs, it's fine. He's going with the HSU or the shoe in-wall speakers we recommended, and he's already impressed by them after just a quick dry fit test run. They'll be sitting about 12 feet away, so he isn't too worried about looking up at a bit an angle at the TV. Mm-hmm. That said, should he flip the HSU speakers upside down so that the tweeters at the bottom, they'll still be a bit higher than their ears when they're sitting down. Will this elevated position for the speakers be any sort of big problem? I bet you couldn't tell the difference one way or the other.
Yeah,
12 feet away.
I
bet you could hear the difference if I paid you.
Wouldn't really hear a difference. Now, there's no harm in turning those speakers upside down. I would go ahead and do it. Sure, they're a few inches closer to your seated ear height. Why not? They are horn loaded. They have some directivity when it comes to the vertical dispersion. So the grills just fit on with magnets, and they absolutely can go on, like upside down, so the logo is still the right way on the speaker, because it's a very symmetrical speaker as far as all that stuff goes. So there's really no harm in turning the speaker upside down. I'd maybe go ahead and do it. If you didn't, I don't think you'd notice. This is a very not big deal on this particular one. Because, I mean, if you were talking, okay, I wound up with my TV and speakers essentially, like butted up against the ceiling, now we've got a bit more of an issue. But 4.5 feet, that's basically like a foot, maybe a foot and a half higher than you would have done in an ideal scenario. 12 feet away, I don't think it's going to be any difference whatsoever. But go ahead, turn them upside down. Why not?
Sure. Okay. Let's see here. Ilango's brother asked for a TV recommendation. It's going to be in a bright sunroom, but it's their main TV, and they use it daily and spend a lot of time in that room. He only asked for something in the 49 to 52 inch range because he doesn't know how TVs work.
He's going back. I mean, those were the sizes back in the LCD only days. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's right next to it. It's like in the corner next to a window. The window's on the right. That's right. On the right side wall that this thing almost butts up against, and it's sort of overhanging a breakfast bar.
Yeah. Now, given that it's already kind of hanging out into that opening space, I can
understand not wanting to go bigger. Yeah.
And I mean, I can see that, but I mean, like, the thing is, most of the TVs that are good these days, like 55 inches is as small as they go. Now, I mean, it's not as though he has a really old TV with a gigantic bezel, and therefore you could go way bigger in screen size without noticing it whatsoever. He's already got a pretty thin bezel on the image that he's showing, but I'm still going to say we're going to go for a 55, because the TVs I'm going to talk about have as close to zero bezel as you can get, and then it just kind of makes sense for what he's asking for. You kind of have to go with a 55. I don't think that's going to be the end of the world.
Yeah. Where am I here?
Below the picture. Yeah.
Am I still going? Oh,
yes.
Budget isn't really an issue, but as we can see, this certainly isn't a theater type setup. He's mainly looking at either an LG OLED or a Samsung QLED, possibly one of the new QD OLEDs. What TV we recommend? I am one of the biggest advocates that you do not have to have light control in the room in order to have an OLED.
Dear heavens, no.
But,
and I'm going to argue that that's the way you should go.
But if anybody could make the argument that their TV is going to get too much sunlight,
right?
it is this room next to this big old window. Right?
Yeah.
And if you're not seeing this image and you don't want to go to the Flickr album on AV Gadgets, AVRant, sorry, that's my website's mixed up. AVRant and finding the Flickr album, the YouTube video will be showing all the pictures as well, so you can see this monstrous window that's here. Sure. You can make the argument that this is the room. That being said, the only time I've ever really seen a problem with OLEDs having like a washed out look because they've had direct sunlight on them. First of all, if you have direct sunlight on the whole TV, the whole thing washes out in the same way, so you're never going to notice it. Number one. Number two, he's got blinds. He's got drapes right there. Just pull that forward a little bit, you'd be fine. Okay.
Yeah, so, if you ever get to the point where you're like, I'm having trouble seeing what's on the screen, there are drapes there, so it's not as though there's zero way of cutting out light that's coming right in from the side. But I want to show an example. This is borrowed from Artings. Some of the things that they do is how do things look when there's light shining on it. On your left is an LG OLED. On your right, in this comparison image, is one of the best Samsung QLEDs that gets praised for its anti-glare screen technology. And I want to pay particular attention to that bright room image. Which one of these looks like it's washed out more, right? I'm like, that Samsung...
I can't see it.
You can't see the comparison image? Just scroll down a bit.
Oh, I didn't scroll down. It's on there.
It's right there. No,
I'm like looking at your. I'm looking at your screen. Like, where is it?
No.
Oh, there it is.
So I mean, I've seen this in person, and I've always come back to like, why would I want anything besides the OLED? Now, some people are going to say the pure peak brightness. Okay, now this is where I can start to make an argument for the brand new LG G3. All right, that's the most expensive. Even the 55-inch is coming in at $2,500. Okay, so this is not cheap for a 55-inch TV. But the brand new G3 that has just come out, this is the one that uses the micro lens array technology, has been measured at a true 1,500 nits. Okay, now granted, the highest end Samsung QLEDs are coming in at 2,000 nits when their peak brightness. But 1,500 nits from an OLED, I'm like, there's no, this isn't bright enough anymore. That just doesn't exist. And the black levels and the reflection handling of the OLED, in my opinion, are far superior. You don't have this rainbowing that happens on the QLEDs when a bright image is there, and just the ambient black level is raised so much more on the QLEDs than it is on the OLEDs. I've never really understood QLEDs are so much better for bright rooms. Like, no, they're just flatly not. I would rather have my peak whites look a little bit dimmer in the bright light and retain some actual good black levels. That matters much more to me. So I'm saying OLED all day long. I'm saying specifically LG OLED all day long because the QD OLEDs have a bit of this black washout as well. So yeah, I'm going LG OLED all day long. I can argue for the G3 despite its high price because it is the brightest by a good margin. One downside though, according to the reviewers that I trust, the G3 has taken a step back in terms of its built-in speakers, and it sure looked like they're just using the TV's built-in speakers in their current setup as far as the picture that Ilango showed, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of a step back. So that's where I could maybe suggest to you that the G2, the outgoing model, the LG G2, which is not as bright as the G3, but it was still previously the brightest OLED that existed. It got pretty close to 1,000 nits peak. You can get the 55-inch of the G2 for $1,700 these days. So big difference in price there. Still was the formerly brightest OLED, and the speakers were considerably better on the G2, apparently, than on the G3. There's people who've done the head-to-head comparisons, like, I don't know what they did to the G3 speakers, but they took a big old step back, which is unfortunate. So the G2 used to have actually pretty decent speakers built into it, despite how thin it is. So there are, of course, the C2, the C3. I don't think the price difference between those and the G2 in this case makes sense. I would take a G2 in this instance over a C2 or a C3. So that's where I would point you. If you can afford the G3 and maybe add a soundbar, then that is the best of all worlds. But the G2 might fit, everything that you're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm scrolling. Oh, we're done with that.
Yeah.
Joseph in Melbourne, Australia. Melbourne. Quite a while back, Joseph wrote us to ask what projector he should get. He has a much larger home cinema and a much higher budget than our typical discussions. A screen over 200 inches and the primary seat's 20 feet away. So we end up recommending Sony's GTZ 380 flagship 4K projector, or as it's known in Australia, GTZ.
That's correct.
He is very happy with the image it projects, and he's happy to report that for most movie content, even setting the lasers to 50% is more than enough light output. So that means HDR can truly deliver a stunning experience, and as the lasers slowly dim over time, he's got plenty of headroom available to compensate. It's great.
Hooray!
So now
it's
he has
$80,000 projector, and that doesn't include a lens. The lenses are $8,000. That's US dollars, so it's up there in the budget.
It's up there, is right.
But when you've got a 225-inch screen and you're sitting 20 feet away and you have the money to go for it, I was like, that's the one to get.
Yeah.
and so he's very happy with it. I'm very happy that he's happy with it.
So now he has a question for us on the speaker side of things. He's just been watching the images. He's just been reading lips this whole time. It's closed captioning. He went with Sonos Faber speakers up front, and they're powered by a turn-off setup using turn-off's amplitude amplifiers, 200 watts per channel, and an altitude processor. He had a turn-off calibrator come out and do the full setup, but the calibrator warned him that for his very large room size and seating distance, the speakers he chose are relatively inefficient. The calibrator set things so that the system would be safe and not damage the speakers, but now he has to turn the volume up to basically 0 just to be comfortably loud. It definitely isn't movie theater or IMAX loud at this point, but the calibrator warned him that he shouldn't ever turn the volume up higher than 0 dB because doing so might cause clipping and distortion that could potentially damage his Sonos Faber speakers. So, first up, 0 on the master volume is supposed to be a full reference or reference volume and movie theater allowed, right? His turn-off processor does have the option to turn the master volume up as high as plus 20, but should he do that? He isn't supposed to set it higher than 0, right? That means to be that's meant to be no attenuation to the original signal, isn't it? All right, so there's a couple of things going on here.
Right. Yeah.
The first of which, not everything's mixed to master volume to reference level. So that's for movies, and even if that were true, not every disc that you get is mastered properly. So
sure. But I mean, most movies are. So that but on the source side, that's not 100% the case. However,
and we don't know what else he's doing in here other than watching discs, right? We don't think he's just watching discs. So YouTube, I don't ever set mine up higher than like minus 30. 35 or something. Sure. Because it's so loud.
Yeah. YouTube has not been properly mastered to theater reference volume.
To anything.
That's definitely the case.
But so there's that going on, and so the question you ask yourself is how much could he have? The idea here is that he doesn't want you to clip your speakers and blow out a tweeter,
which is a very reasonable thing to warn your customer. So, yes. I mean, what's happened here is, let's take your specific system, your specific equipment out of the picture. Let's just say you've got a system that can do everything correctly. In that instance, 0 dB on your master volume dial, after it's been calibrated, would be reference volume. That's what 0 is supposed to connote on your master volume. And depending on the source material you're watching, if it was source material that truly was mastered to theater reference volume, then that would be, yes, you're hearing it exactly the way it was mastered. It is, in fact, with a system that is fully capable and has been calibrated, 0 dB will always be whatever the signal was mastered to, you're hearing it at that, all right? If they chose on the content creation side to master things quieter or louder, well, you're hearing it however they mastered it. That's the overarching idea of what calibrating your system to 0 dB on the master volume dial is supposed to be. But you, in your specific situation with your current Sonos Faber speakers, you don't have that, because what your turn-off calibrator was trying to explain to you is these speakers can't, they physically cannot actually play that loud in this large of a room from the seating distance this far.
Yeah, from the seating distance that you're at. And we've talked about seating distance quite a bit on this podcast, and that's where you're running up against the capability. Like, can you put enough power into these speakers to get
That's
that
right.
much volume out. Certainly, it's just a matter of making sure that you've got the amplifier power. What will happen to the speakers? They will damage themselves trying to do that.
Or it will require so much wattage that even with your very capable Trinnov amplitude amplifiers, they aren't kilowatt amplifiers.
Right.
And
there's 200 watts. Yeah.
You know, mathematically, you might be in the instance where, like, mathematically speaking, you would need 4,000 watts to get your Sonus Faber speakers from 20 feet away in the room size that you have to actually produce full reference volume. So your amplifier would clip. It wouldn't be able to deliver 4,000 watts. That just isn't something your very capable amplifiers could do. So what your Trinnov calibrator opted to do was say, okay, I'm going to set what is essentially the safe maximum volume for this system. He kind of arbitrarily chose to set that to 0 dB. He could have, again, as a sort of arbitrary choice, said, I am going to set this so that 0 dB on the master volume dial would be full reference volume if your speakers and amplifiers were capable of getting there. But I am then going to tell my client, don't ever set the volume higher than -20. Because if you do, you might blow up your speakers or your amplifiers. Like, that's the issue here. So I think where the confusion came in is you're very understandably thinking, isn't 0 dB supposed to be reference volume? It clearly isn't. I've been to a movie theater. My system at 0 dB on the master volume dial is quieter than that. It's just obvious to me. So did the calibrator do something wrong, or is reference volume something I don't understand? It's neither of those things. It's that he said it and has warned you, don't turn it higher than 0. Your speakers and your amplifiers can't physically go louder than that. They'll start to damage themselves. So I think that's the misunderstanding that happened there.
Right. And I like his idea of putting it at 0 because I think it's easier to remember than -20. You know?
Exactly.
And it's also kind of, there's that natural break where you're saying, well, I'm going past 0. You know,
that's right. Yeah.
I mean, I think and I've got plenty of, my speakers probably aren't getting 10 watts in here at any given time, except the subwoofers during that one scene. And,
why does your Trinnov have the ability to go to +20? It's like 0 dB is not maximum volume.
Yeah.
0 dB is ideally reference volume. In your case, it's been set at sort of this arbitrary maximum to warn you, okay, don't go past this point on the master volume dial. You're going to start damaging your equipment. But the +20 is there because, like we talked about, some content has been mastered, like what's in the recording, is quieter than reference volume. And maybe you, the user, you want to hear it at full reference volume, so maybe you end up turning it to +10 to get it there. But you wouldn't want to do that because in your system, it's going to start to potentially damage some equipment.
Yes. AV Gadgets appears to be down right now, so that's exciting for me.
Fun stuff.
So, yes, and how he did this, I don't know. There's a lot of ways that you can do it. Like on a normal AV receiver, you just bump the trim down until of each speaker. You would, you set it to calibrate itself at the right level, and then go, oh my, it's not going to get anywhere near that for the reference level. So let's calibrate it instead to something more reasonable, and then you just change the trim levels. But you only have like 12 dB of or
you got plus minus 10 or 12. So I mean, if you had used an automated system like Odyssey, let's say, if you didn't have a Trinnov, you had a Denon, and they had used the automated system, it might have set your trim levels to like +10, +12, the maximum, because it was trying to get there. And then the calibrator might have said, you know what? I'm going to manually put that all the way down to like -10 instead. So everything's going to sound 20 decibels too quiet, but this means when you turn the master volume up to 0, I'm confident you're not going to literally damage your equipment. So I think it's a reasonable thing your calibrator
I think it is too. And from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense because he is saying to you, if you break your speakers, it's your fault. I'm doing all this to make sure that you don't, try to impress your friends, jack this thing up to +20, and then kill your speakers and then call me and tell me it's my fault for not
like I said, he could have arbitrarily set everything, the trim levels are at +10 to try and get your speakers there, and then just warned you never put it up past -20. So that was just a decision. But I think what he did makes sense, and I think your question about it is entirely reasonable.
I think so too. Let me just paste that because now AVRant's back up. All right. It says, could we provide a clear definition of reference volume actually means? And we have done that. I'm actually going to link up an AV Gadgets article, which is what is reference level. It goes through it in excruciating detail so that you understand what the dB levels are and why it is set the way it is. You know, why it is that when we calibrate, it doesn't actually calibrate it to 85 dB like you think it should because it's uncomfortable. Reference volume is generally speaking uncomfortably loud. If you've been to an IMAX theater, you've left the IMAX theater and thought, that was too loud.
Or a THX certified theater, which a lot of people go, it was darn loud in there in that THX certified
that was
theater.
Too much.
Or Dolby Cinemas. Most people go to Dolby Cinemas and like, this is really loud. Well, those are the theaters that are full theater reference volume.
Yeah, reference volume, yes. And really, honestly, those, and we're going to be talking about this in a second, those are the speakers you should be looking at for because
we're going to get into that. But yeah, I mean, just to give the clear definition, one thing to understand is something called decibels full scale. So decibels full scale means that in the content, okay, not your playback system, in the content, this is the loudest the signal goes. So that is the full scale. So in the content, in a movie reference level, the full scale, the maximum loudness is 105 decibels from any individual speaker. And then there is the dedicated low frequency effects channel, and that can go to full scale 115 decibels. So that's the peak. And then the idea is that the average level for the movie as a whole is 20 decibels below that, 85 decibels. So those are the two figures you'll always see when it comes to reference volume. Average 85 decibels, peaks 105 in the speakers, or peaks as high as 115 in the dedicated low frequency effects channel. So that's really all it means. And when you're talking about what does it mean to calibrate to reference volume, it means that when your master volume is at 0 dB, again, in an ideal situation, if the content was mastered to full reference volume, then that's what you're going to hear. You're going to hear an average of 85 decibels with peaks as high as 105 from any given speaker. So that's really all it means. In your case, your calibrator was like, that ain't safe. Your speakers and your amplifiers can't actually do that in this big room sitting 20 feet away. So I have arbitrarily set everything lower than that.
So since he isn't getting the experience he had hoped for, he's looking for a new set of front speakers, but the recommendations he's been getting seem to be solely dependent on which brands the dealer sells. He's talked to a few and got recommendations for JBL, Crix, which is an Australian brand that I've reviewed before.
He is in Australia, so that makes sense.
Klipsch and B&W. B&W is a terrible
that would
choice
not
here.
be the choice for this one.
It's like
the other ones make sense.
The other ones I could get behind, but B&W is an awful choice here. Whoever recommended that, you should no longer talk to that person.
Very nice speakers, but not for this particular application.
No. Unless you're planning on moving them to the seat next to you. Right. He's also been told he should go for horn-loaded speakers, and those would be better for home cinema like that. Can we help advise him on this and sort through this bit? Well, the person who told you horn-loaded was not wrong. You actually compression horn.
Sure. I mean, what we're going to get at is here. What you need are high sensitivity speakers. You need speakers because you already have your amplifiers, and I'm not going to tell you to exchange your amplifiers for some kilowatt amplifiers. That isn't necessary. But as long as you have amplifiers that are rated at 200 watts RMS for all your channels, 400 watt peaks, which is what your amplitude can deliver. Now we know that's the amplifier we're working with, and it's a totally reasonable amplifier. But we also know your seating distance, and we know that in a very big room like yours, like I've talked about before, if you go to a wide open field, there's no walls around you whatsoever. Every time you double your distance from the speaker, you lose 6 decibels in that setting. In most rooms, in most normal houses, which are rooms smaller than your home cinema, it's more like maybe -4 because we have some reinforcement from the reflections inside the room. But in a very big room like yours, it probably still isn't the full -6 for every doubling of distance, but you're maybe getting close to like -5 decibels for every doubling of distance in your room, and you're getting towards the 7 meter mark.
Yeah.
So, you really are losing maybe 15 decibels, more than that, potentially. Genuinely so, just from sheer distance. So, given that we know all of these things, if you want to look for speakers that are about 95 decibel sensitivity, which is, probably about 9 decibels more sensitive than most speakers. Most speakers are 86, 87 decibels sensitive. That's with a standard 2.83 volt signal being fed into them, given whatever impedance that they have. So if you have ones that are about 95 decibels, somewhere in that, 94, 95, 96, something like that, that's the type of sensitivity you're looking for. Now, will those speakers, does it have to be horn loaded? Not necessarily. What we care about is the sensitivity. It just happens to be that to get speakers that are that sensitive, they're very often horn loaded or compression tweeter loaded. But I mean, it's not that horn is specifically what you're looking for. You're looking for the high sensitivity, and then high sensitivity speakers are very often horn loaded. So the advice is not wrong. It's just a little clarification there.
So can we help advise him and sort through this bit? So yes, like Rob said, you were looking for. So I'm going to link up a picture here, and it's actually sent in by one of the listeners, Andrew, not Andrew from AG, a different Andrew, and it's an acoustically transparent screen with a light on behind it, and you can see.
Okay.
Essentially, I think these are JTR speakers, which is what Rob's
probably
going to recommend. And like we said, it's not this. We are very agnostic to driver type and, in fact, configuration when it comes to tweeters or whatever. Yes, certain tweeters maybe have just advantages over other types of tweeters, but a well-made speaker with any driver configuration will sound good. I'm completely convinced of that, and can sound as good, if not better, than speakers with better drivers, but maybe in worse design enclosures or with not as effective crossover designs. So the making sure that you're getting the efficient enough speaker, and there are speakers out there, or manufacturers that will fudge those numbers. So you have to be, you have to know for sure. You have to do your research and make sure.
Klipsch's are a little bit fudged because they hew towards what the tweeter is putting out as opposed to the woofers. The woofers might not actually have the ability to keep up with the tweeter at the absolute peak. Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was thinking of there.
Yeah.
But so be careful of that. But this image will give you an idea of the size of these things. These are all behind I think 120-inch screen. It might be a little smaller than that, and they barely fit back there. So,
but I mean, given the size of his theater, I think he'll be able to manage. So, if you were in North America, and even not in North America, like you are in Australia, there's going to be a substantial shipping cost to send them to you in Australia. But my top choice would be JTR, and specifically their Noesis 212 model, which is a $3,500 each US dollar speaker. Now, those... You're looking at this and you're like, oh, that looks like a nice, 2-woofer, 1-horn-loaded tweeter bookshelf speaker. No, those are two 12-inch drivers in a very heavy HDF case. And that is not just a horn-loaded tweeter. There's actually a horn-loaded mid-range with a coaxial compression tweeter behind that gigantic horn, okay? So these are big speakers. I'm specifically mentioning the Noesis 212, which is not JTR's physically largest speaker, but it is their most sensitive speaker. Now, here's the thing. JTR, all of their speakers, the least sensitive speaker that JTR sells is 95 dB. So any of JTR speakers are going to work just fine. Like, obviously, for your surround speakers, if you end up upgrading those too, you can definitely go for, their model that is designed with an angle to mount on the wall. That is a 95 dB sensitive speaker, and that's their Noesis 110. You can get it either flat or with a slant, and that is totally going to work. It absolutely has the sensitivity to keep up. But at your front speakers where you want to have maybe some headroom, that 212, it's actually 101 dB sensitive with the standard input voltage. You've got some headroom to spare. If you want to turn your Trinnov beyond 0 dB after this one has been calibrated, this speaker can keep up with that, included with your current amplitude amplifiers. You could even put more wattage into these speakers than your amplitude can supply. This thing will take 2,000 watts.
Yeah.
It has that kind of power handling, but because its sensitivity is so high, with your current amplifiers, you'll be able to get to full movie reference volume, no problem, and that's what we're after. So I like that as my top choice. Now, if it turns out that importing JTR speakers to Australia is just prohibitively expensive, which is not out of the realm of possibility. The one out of the ones that you said are available to you, I would go with JBL. JBL certainly has speakers based on their M2 reference monitors that use the same drivers that they have in there. That's like a dual diaphragm compression in a essentially horn. They call it a waveguide, but it looks exactly like a horn. Big old... Is that a 18-inch? It's at least a 15-inch driver in that one. I forget. It might even be an 18-inch. But I wouldn't necessarily point you to the M2 itself because that is a self-powered speaker, and that isn't really what you need. But they have a passive version of it, which they just call their studio monitor 4367. Looks exactly like the M2, but it's the passive version. Now, those are, in the US, $8,000 each. These are not inexpensive speakers, but to get the type of output and quality that you're chasing after, and you had Sonos Faber, so I don't think expensive speakers are out of the question for you. That's the type of thing you would go to. They also have, if you have in-wall speakers, I don't know if you went in-wall or freestanding. If you want an in-wall version, they have that from their JBL Synthesis line. That is the SCL1. So that is one you can build into the wall, which uses the same technology, the exact same tweeter. They go with dual 12-inch drivers in that one instead of the single 15, but all the specifications are the same. So those are the types I would point you to. Something out of there is definitely going to work. JBL in their consumer series does have their HDI series that gets about as close as any consumer speaker is going to get, but it's not quite. It's like 91 dB sensitive. You're still a little bit shy if you go with the HDI. So you're getting into some pretty spendy speakers, but if you can import those JTRs, that's what I'd get.
All right. There we go. Lastly, Rob emailed Joseph last week, in case any of this was time sensitive, and recommended the JTR Noises. Yeah. 212 model, which he has now inquired about importing. Can that model be used horizontally?
Yes, it absolutely can. The horn on that is symmetrical, and like I say, it's actually a horn-loaded mid-range back there as well. So it plays right down to 500 hertz through the horn. So you've got no problem with directivity vertical versus horizontal on that one.
Jeez. That's a silly speaker. All right, Zach. Zach's house had some speaker wire that was run by the previous owner. It's monster cable speaker wire. It has some printing on the jacket that says signal flow with some arrows next to it.
Uh-huh.
The good old days of monster cable.
Yep.
I was just talking the other day to somebody who was he was talking about a bike manufacturer brand. No, it was somebody was suing somebody for using the same name as them or similar name as them. I was like, oh, they've got nothing on Monster.
Hey, Monster Energy Drink is doing that now too. They took up the mantle.
Oh, have they really? I think maybe it's a curse with the name. Anyways,
it seems to be.
He's sort of directional fiber optic HDMI cables, but for speaker wire, that's total BS, right? Yeah, that's BS.
I would hope so, because otherwise, you connect these speaker wires one way, and the drivers of your speakers can only push out. They can never come back in. Or if you flip the speaker wire around the other way, then they could only suck in and they could never push back out. No, that is speaker drivers move in and out. The electrical signal essentially is reversing polarity for every in-out movement that's going on there. The notion that the signal can only flow in one direction through a speaker wire is super ridiculous.
I'm surprised he's not asking about the different colors of the wires on the inside there, which is certainly just the jacket itself that makes it look that way.
Or it could be a mix of aluminum and copper, because Monster had that whole stupidness of different frequencies travel at different speeds through different thicknesses of wire. Yeah. Because they somehow know.
Electrons. They're so smart. They just, you got to corral them. You need like a sheepdog of a cable to corral them to go the right direction and everything. It's very confusing.
Yeah, I'm not sad they've gone away.
Adam has a dedicated media rack closet that is outside of his home theater. It's close enough that he's been able to run a regular HDMI cable for the theater's display, but he also has 2 other TVs in the house, and he'd like to be able to send the same signal to all 3 displays at the same time. His AV receiver is a Denon X3600H, and it has 3 HDMI outputs. Mm-hmm. There are 2 TVs. The other 2 TVs are about 30 feet away and 70 to 80 feet away, respectively. So it seems like regular passive HDMI cables aren't going to cut it. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can try.
I don't even know if you can get an 80-foot copper HDMI cable of any specification.
I'm sure you can. It would just be a very old one. So should he go with a Cat 6 solution or just long HDMI cables? What should he get? The basement is still just exposed framing at this moment. Plans for finishing are underway. Okay, so in-wall rated, whatever it is.
Yep.
Second of all, I just am not a fan of the what is that solution? What's it called? I've forgotten the name of it.
HD base T is what you're thinking about? Probably?
Yeah. I'm just not a fan of the HD base T solution. I think at first it made a lot of sense for especially long runs. You could take this, and it was cheaper than trying to get an HDMI cable that would go all the way. This was before active cables were as readily available as they were, and it was also before a lot of the changes and upgrades, let's call them upgrades, to the HDMI spec that allowed things like audio return channel and all these other things to happen that don't work over HD base T like at all.
Sometimes. So I mean, we do have HDMI to Ethernet conversion, including under actual HD base T. That is the equivalent of premium high speed, HDMI 2.0 or the 18 gigabits per second bandwidth. Those solutions do exist. And if you're only ever using your Denon X3600H, which is HDMI 2.0, not HDMI 2.1, and your TVs are 4K 60, not 4K 20, then you could use a Cat 6 solution. You could use an HDMI to Ethernet conversion, HD base T. That would all work. But I would absolutely stress to anybody who has particularly a currently unfinished basement that run conduit. Like, the walls are open. It's very inexpensive to run conduit. Make it conduit that is as big a diameter as you possibly can, because you are going to have some bends somewhere, and pulling HDMI cables through conduit is a hassle if you don't have a nice wide diameter. So the biggest diameter conduit that you can run, there is no reason not to. It will absolutely at some point in the future come in handy. So my general recommendation these days when it comes to HDMI is, you don't know, you might end up upgrading to a new AV receiver that does have HDMI 2.1. You might end up upgrading your displays to 8K displays or ones that can do 4K 120. So why not at this point go with an in-wall rated, ultra high speed certified fiber optic HDMI cable, because Rui Pro that we've mentioned before has those $115 for the 85-foot length. So they're not like outlandishly expensive for that length of a fiber optic, fully certified, in-wall rated. So that would be my recommendation, but conduit is actually the even bigger recommendation, because no matter what you do, if you just want to get premium high-speed HDMI cables for now, but run them in the conduit, because then if and when you need to replace that, it's so much easier. So that's my top recommendation.
Yeah, the conduit is very, very important. I think Rob's right. The fact that the active cables or the fiber optic cables, they're just so much thinner and so much easier to pull. It's certainly going to make a lot of difference as far as your ability to get things around. Try, not hard 90-degree turns. Use the bends, swooping bends.
But I'd absolutely want to run ultra high speed HDMI at this point, because things are going that way. So, walls are open. Why not do that now?
If you like, and I'm going to link up an article here about using more than one display and what some of the problems are, and you are going to run into this.
Because you're probably going to upgrade one of those displays before the other two.
And when you do, you're going to be like, Tom said something about there being a problem if I upgrade my display. These are the things that you're going to run into, and it goes back to our very. I think it's our very first question. Was it our first or second question?
I don't remember.
With a problem with the lowest common denominator.
Yep.
And suddenly you're going to have this new display that can do 8K 240 or whatever the stupidity they're going to call that, and then you're going to want to take advantage of it, and now it doesn't work. And
but I don't want my limiting factor, my lowest common denominator, to be my
cable.
I don't want that to be the case. So.
Which is going to be the case eventually anyway.
Honestly.
Honestly.
But then you've got the conduit.
Dan has appreciated our conversations. Thanks, Dan. Next question.
Yeah.
Our discussion last week for starting into vinyl records and turntables was helpful. He picked up a used Thorens turntable. Didn't cost him much. Thorens, Thorens. Anyways, didn't cost him much, and he still has his old record collection. He quickly rediscovered how preparing everything to spin the record is a lot more work than streaming music. It's almost like people stopped doing it for a reason. It's weird. But there is something about the way vinyl sounds. He tried an experiment using a Steely Dan album that he owns in 3 different formats: vinyl, Apple iTunes, and SACD. Honestly, he kind of prefers the vinyl. On top of that, he was over at the house of a friend who has quite the serious stereo rig, $12,000 turntable, that sort of thing. They spun some vinyl, and Dan thought it sounded amazing. He appreciated what we said about how with vinyl and turntables, there's such a thing as being able to put together a rig that all the vinyl lovers out there will agree is perfection. He's just started trying to research cartridges and needles to potentially replace what came with the used Thorens that unit he bought. And he can already see what a rabbit hole it is, but there's so much to try and sort through. So can we point him to some good, trustworthy resources so that he can learn about everything vinyl and turntables? It's fun reading up on this, but it's also a whole new level of insanity. So where can he go to get the real info and avoid the BS? I think last week I did link up Andrew's article for
a bunch of articles at AV Gadgets. Yeah. We have a bunch of links there last week, but I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that's everything turntables and vinyl. No. It's not absolutely comprehensive. So I mean, a few sites I have quibbles with basically all of them, but a few places where I'm like, okay, this information is pretty reasonable. I don't mind pointing someone's there. Tech Radar, they have a Vinyl 101, everything you need to know about record players, and it's pretty decent. It's pretty down the middle, factual. I don't mind pointing people to Tech Radar's Vinyl 101. So I'll have the link for that one. Fluence, who is a retailer and sells turntables, they have a whole playlist on YouTube, which is very comprehensive, covers a lot of things. Now, they do have a bunch of, of course, they're using their own products to demonstrate things. You have to expect that. And of course, there's some marketing built into it for Fluence turntables in particular. But if you can ignore just some of that, honestly, the info that they provide in there is pretty solid when they're just talking about how the systems actually work, what all the components are, what you need to look out for when it's time to replace things. Like they're pretty on the level with all of that stuff. Like I say, they're naturally using their own products to demonstrate, but I can forgive that. If the actual information they're providing and they're just saying, hey, here's an example of it, we make it, you can buy it from us if you want to, I don't have a gigantic problem with that. So I'll have a link for that playlist there. So let's see, Technology Connections. I enjoy his content on YouTube. He has a nice one about how stereo sound actually works on vinyl records, because I've seen horrible explanations of how you actually get a stereo signal out of a single needle tracking through a rotating piece of vinyl. So his explanation is pretty good about how stereo actually works. That's just a nice little curiosity if you want that. And then I'm going to provide a link that has nothing to do with turntables of vinyl, but if you want to understand how digital audio actually works, not the horrible misunderstanding that you normally see where everyone shows you a stair step and then shows you more dots and they just play connect the dots and they're like, this is why you need higher sampling rates, which is all a bunch of hooey. Ziph.org, which is spelled with an X, xiph.org. They have the best explanations. It's only a couple of videos of how digital audio actually works, and it is super valuable to understand what is really going on there. So all those links will be in the show notes.
Right. I will also link up my editorial that I wrote. I don't know how long ago I wrote this thing. It's 2021, called Analog versus Digital, which is best. And you can imagine what I probably said. Sure. And I kind of go through a lot of what Rob's talking about as well and kind of break it down. I do want to say, and I can't stress this enough, there's nothing wrong with liking vinyl.
Absolutely not.
There's nothing wrong.
There's plenty of very valid reason to want it.
And I go through quite a few of them in this article here, and there's a lot of reasons why the digital or the non-vinyl version of a track is inferior to the vinyl version of the track. When you say, I compared this to that, there are so many things like you did not do an A/B comparison. You did not do a straight comparison because you didn't set up I know you didn't because no one would have. It's very hard to do anyways. Is to make sure that you're doing with level matching and everything else that you would have to do. There's so many things that go into.
No, this was just a fun on the fly comparison,
which is fine, and it's you enjoyed it more. That is enough. That's all that really matters. What I don't like is when that experience takes somebody and they just go straight to the other side of it, which is I now need to get rid of my digital collection and buy nothing but analog, and then go ahead and now I can't even digitize my analog because if I digitize it, then it ruins it somehow.
Yeah, no, the biggest misunderstanding and misattribution is believing that the format is responsible for the sound. That the only way to hear things like this is the vinyl format itself. You can 100% make a digital recording sound exactly like a vinyl recording if you want to. It's just that what you actually purchase, there can be audible differences because of the way it was mastered, not because of the format itself. So if there's one gigantic misattribution that I do want to clarify, it's that don't say, I listened to this album on 2 different formats. I preferred format A over format B. Therefore, that format, that piece of hardware, is the superior sounding thing.
Right.
No, that is incorrect, but there absolutely can be the case where there's a vinyl version of this album, there's a CD version of this album, and I think the vinyl version of this album sounds better. That can definitely be the case because they are different masters.
Right. So lastly, he asked moving magnet versus moving coil. What should he know? He's finding it maddening trying to get a straight answer. How long will it take you to answer this, since I don't care about this?
Oh, a little bit. Go ahead. Yeah,
I just need to go to the bathroom.
Sure. So the simple answer is that there are far more pieces of equipment that will work with a moving magnet cartridge. That is the more common, it is the less expensive. With a moving magnet, I mean, these describe what they are. So you've got this little needle, it's tracking along inside of a spinning vinyl record, and so that little needle is vibrating based on the grooves inside of the record. Now, it's a little lever that's going on there. On the other end of that lever, you can either have a little magnet that is now vibrating along with the movement of the needle on the other side of that lever. So you have some stationary electrical coils and then a little magnet that's vibrating inside of it that generates an electrical signal. You've got a magnet that's moving through some electrical coils. Now, of course, the reverse of that is you could put the little electrical coil on the end of the lever that has the needle on it. So now the little coil is vibrating and you have some stationary magnets, and that generates the electrical current that way. So one of the things has to move. Either the magnet has to move inside of stationary coils or the coil has to move around some stationary magnets. Either way, thanks to electromagnetism, you'll generate an electrical signal. So with the moving coil, it is typically physically lighter. That's going to be the advantage that moving coil fans will point to. It's almost always physically lighter than the magnet. You can just picture a little coil of wire versus a magnet and go, yeah, the magnet is probably going to be physically heavier. So they'll point to that and say, well, that means that, the needle can track the movements that much more easily. There's less mass, there's less inertia, so you can vibrate that coil more exactly like the movement of the needle. There's no, damping or inertia just because of the heavier mass the way there is with the moving magnet. The downside is it generates a much weaker electrical signal. So that means you need to use a different type of preamplifier that boosts the signal even more, which means there's more noise in the signal because you are amplifying an even weaker electrical signal. So you're giving this trade-off between what should be more precise movement because of lower inertia with a weaker electrical signal that probably has picked up more noise, or at least you're amplifying any noise that's in it to a greater degree. So that's why there's always going to be an argument between magnet and coil between fans. The other side, just on the practical side, is on a moving magnet cartridge, you can replace just the needle and magnet and keep the rest of the cartridge. In the moving coil, you pretty much have to replace the entire cartridge. There's no way to replace just the needle and coil inside, so sometimes it costs more to replace. But since the moving magnet generates the slightly stronger electrical signal, that's why there's just more equipment out there that will work with a moving magnet. If you go get an AV receiver, off the shelf, Denon, Marantz, Onkyo, or whatever, they'll have a dedicated phono input, and it'll say right on there, MM only. All right. That means it's designed, the preamplification on that specific phono input is enough to boost a moving magnet signal, but it would be too weak. Your moving coil signal would sound very quiet. So you'd have to have a dedicated preamp that is specifically for moving coil. So that's the straight answer.
All right. Whatever he said. Yeah. Infinite Gary. We're clearly fans of the projection screen sold by Seymour AV and Seymour Screen Excellence. Gary has never seen one for himself. He used his Stewart film screens, he's studio tech for many years now. Other than the lower prices, is there anything in terms of performance that makes us prefer Seymour over Stewart? Seymour's got the best acoustically transparent material.
It's the acoustically transparent specifically.
Other than that, I don't think we ever really recommend
for their
them.
Solid white screens, there's certainly not a performance reason to go Seymour over Stewart for the solid white, or for the, like Stewart has their Firehawk, right, the gray with the higher gain on it. Seymour has something that's kind of similar, but no, I mean, I wouldn't say on strictly performance, price no object, that there's an advantage to Seymour there, but Seymour has a greater variety of woven acoustically transparent screens. Stewart has a woven option, but it is quite low gain. So if you're like, well, I want woven acoustically transparent, but I want something that's pretty darn close to 1.0 gain, not like a 0.5 or a 0.6 gain. Well, Seymour has that. Very color neutral, doesn't let a lot of light leak through, and exceedingly good woven acoustic transparency. So that's where we really prefer Seymour on a performance basis, is specifically for woven acoustically transparent.
Alvin has a 7.2.4 setup with both BenQ, with the BenQ MS535A projector and a Vizio P series, P659G1 LCD TV. His speakers are all Clips reference series, and he has a pair of SVS PB1000 subs. His primary receiver is an Onkyo RZ730. And then he has a Carver AV505 5-channel amplifier, 80 watts by 5 channels, all channels driven, as well as an older Denon 1911 receiver that uses the power surround backs via its Zone 2 output, plus an additional stereo setup in his kitchen. Mm-hmm. Seems overkill, but let's just keep going here. He was previously using just the BenQ projector with an Amazon pull-down screen. That projector model can accept a 1080p signal, but it's actually native SVGA resolution, which is 800 by 600. So everything is being scaled. He only recently added the Vizio P Series LCD TV. It's a model from 2019, but it can do 4K 60 with HDR. He's found that he now uses the TV the vast majority of the time. Naturally, with both displays plugged into the dual HDMI outputs of his Onkyo, his sources will refuse to output 4K and HDR to his TV unless he unplugged the projector. Just talked about this.
Yep.
He did find that he can go to the Onkyo setup menu and select only to output one of his HDMI output ports or the other, but he has to remember to do that prior to turning on any of his sources, so it remains a bit of a hassle. Is there any way to trick his system into thinking he has a 4K projector so this menu switching isn't necessarily? Yeah, HD Fury, man. You want to spend like $200-300 on this thing just to do that?
Oh, more than that, unfortunately, if you really want to make this headache-free. Yeah. Because it's not just the resolution. There's also the HDR side of it. Your Vizio
that's different
P-Series.
Now, huh? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, your Vizio P Series can also do HDR. So if you want it to be seamless, where the source device, whatever it is always outputting the 4K signal, the HDR signal, if it's HDR content, that it can always just do that and have both the P Series TV and this SVGA resolution projector plugged in at the same time, you need a device that not only can downscale the 4K resolution, but can also convert the HDR to SDR. Otherwise, you're still running into handshaking issues and probably just lowest common denominator thing again, where HDR would just never show up on your Vizio P Series anymore if you didn't have one that does both resolution scaling and HDR to SDR conversion. So there is such a device. It's HD Fury's 4K Diva, if you're sticking with 4K resolution, 18 gigabits per second. If you want a device that will do this all the way up to 4K 120 with variable refresh rate, not that any of your displays do that now, but in the future, if you did, then you'd be going all the way up to their 8K Vroom device, which is $550, so actually not that much more. Maybe you just get that to be future-proof. But none of that makes sense with the price points that you paid for your displays.
That's right.
All right? $500 is more than he paid for his projector. So the entire projector plus a $500
it's
4K
weird that he's
Diva.
got all this amplification for speakers that he clearly don't need it, and then he's got like these these displays he spent almost no money on. So
You're right. So
Interesting.
I mean, I can give you the answer that yes, it exists, but I don't think it makes sense. I would think it would make much more sense to save that $500, save up a little bit more, and put it towards a 4K HDR compatible projector, because some of those are down to the $1,100 price point now. So I don't think it makes sense spending basically half of that on an HD Fury, right this second.
All right. Yeah, he primarily used his Amazon Fire Stick 4K for his streaming sources, but ever since adding the TV, even when he chooses just one HDMI output on his Onkyo receiver, the Fire TV still seems to mess up quite often, including things like audio dropouts or getting stuck in only outputting stereo audio. For the time being, he's resorted to only ever using his Fire TV with his projector, and then only ever using his Xbox streaming services with his TV. He's thought about getting a second Amazon Fire TV device, but is there any other workaround that would give him a smooth experience using whatever source he wants on either display? Unplug the projector.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you should have done along. I mean, clearly, he's like, I'm primarily using my Vizio, but occasionally I want to use my unplug the projector. And then you're like, on those occasions where you want to use a projector, plug it back in.
Sure, I mean, until the time that you upgrade to a projector that is 4K and HDR compatible, and then you could have both displays plugged in at the same time. I agree, that is absolutely the simplest solution. I mean, honestly, what you're doing right now works fine for me. I mean, I don't think it's that bad just using one device for streaming to your TV, a different device that you already have.
Yeah, it's not like you're not paying asking to buy something else.
That's right. I mean, I guess he's just, used to the Fire TV interface. I mean, honestly, getting a second Fire TV device for your projector, which is, 1080p at the most, so you could get a pretty inexpensive Fire TV stick, that also wouldn't be the end of the world. Then you can keep the same interface. But I mean, as far as just keeping exactly the source you have, using the Fire TV on both devices, again, the HD Fury could do that for you, but that's a ridiculously expensive solution given the associated equipment. So, yeah.
So we found a deal on a mini DSP 2x4 a while back. It's the original version, not the HD version. He was still able to follow along with a Home Theater Guru's guide for using it, along with Room EQ Wizard and UMIC 1 to dial in his dual subs, as well as his front speakers to subwoofers, crossover, and blend. The software looked a little bit different from the 2x4 HD software that was being shown, but all of the same controls were there, and some of them just didn't offer as great a range of adjustability, mainly the delay setting. So he sent along his results before and after here. So
I'm not exactly sure what these are showing, if these are different measurement positions or different speakers or what all, because it's not labeled. But anyway,
the red is the same in both of these graphs, right?
Well, yeah, so that's what he
included.
The red
must be the combined after, one would think.
Yeah, the red is the after. This is what he's getting. It says main listening position with mains. So I'm, 100 hertz and below. So I'm assuming that's the two subwoofers and the mains playing together, just measured at the main listening position. A very nice, not very squiggly at all line with a slight gradual rise going up, a bit of a house curve going up towards 20 hertz, which is totally normal, makes sense. And if you fold it along
this graph is very misleading, people. If you're watching this on YouTube, yes, you have to look at the bottom and realize that it's going from 120 hertz and down, and the 20 hertz, the 10 to 20 hertz takes up in at least two other. So it's the bottom part is expanded. If you were to even out all these columns, this would look like a much straighter line than it actually looks. But looks
even so, it's a very, very non-squiggly line. Yeah,
it looks good. And then the other one, we don't know what that is. That's got all kinds of stuff. I guess
it had some big peaks and dips in it. Something was going on there.
Something was going on there. I don't know if it was. I think there's two mains and then the subwoofer. And the sub
could be.
Or the two subwoofers, maybe, probably.
Yeah, could be.
To get there, he wound up manually adjusting the distance settings for his subs using his AV receiver rather than solely using the mini DSP. Is he correct in assuming that's fine and the results speak for themselves? Is he done in this room when it comes to subwoofer upgrades and adjustments? I mean, how does it sound? I mean, play a sweep.
Play a sweep.
Play a sweep and you tell us. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean...
By the graph, I certainly wouldn't be spending my time trying to make that any smoother. Yeah. I mean, you
took a lot of pictures. I've seen two pictures of this room, and neither one of them shows us, like, where you sit. So
that's true.
I mean, I see some chairs along the walls, at least one chair along a wall there, and that chair probably doesn't sound very good. But I imagine your primary seat sounds pretty good, so, I mean...
Looks like it from the measurement. I would consider that done, for sure.
Yeah. His Onkyo RZ730 has 9 amplifiers built in to power 7.2.4 configuration like his. His only option is to power the surround back speakers externally. So at first he just used his old Denon 1911 to power surround backs, and he's kept things that way ever since. Then he added the Carver 5-channel amp, and that powers the rest of his floor level speakers now, leaving his Onkyo only to power the 4 overhead speakers. With the clipped speakers and a medium-sized room, there's never been any issue when it comes to power and plenty of output, but he does kind of enjoy being able to cut power to his floor level speakers so he can just listen to what the overhead speakers are playing. Okay. I guess you got me there. You got me there. Yep. There's a reason to for the twice a year you decide to do that. Surely it's worth buying a 5-channel amp. But it means that he currently powers up 3 devices just to power on all of his speakers. Would it be beneficial to simplify? Should he maybe just keep an eye out for a used 7-channel amplifier?
So, look, he needs, for his setup, 2 channels of external amplification. That is
the same thing as me. He needs
semi-legitimately needed. Tom would probably tell you just don't have the surround back speakers and go 5.2.4.
There you go.
You don't need anything besides the one AV receiver. You could power all that.
You don't get to say my advice before I say it. That's not how this podcast works.
You've become predictable, Tom. You've become predictable.
Where are even the surround back speakers? I see his projector. I don't see speakers anywhere.
I don't know where the surround back speakers are. But anyway, assuming you do keep the full 7.2.4 configuration, I mean, I would absolutely advise, go ahead. You got the Carver already. Power your front 3 and your surround backs with that. Let your AV receiver, your Onkyo, power your 4 overheads and your 2 surround speakers, because it is absolutely capable of doing that. Then you don't have to have 3 devices powering on. You just have the amplifier and the AV receiver powering on. That is certainly sufficient. And then, if you do get to where you just want to hear what the overhead speakers are playing, okay, you have to unplug the surround speakers now. But there you go. I think that's less of a hassle for the number of times you're going to listen solely to the overhead speakers and nothing else. I think that's going to be far fewer times throughout the year, and you can just unplug versus having to power 3 things on every time you listen to things.
I literally cannot find a speaker on this back wall.
I don't know.
I can't find it.
Oh, you know what? It's tucked into the shelf there. There it is. Beside that big letter B, to the right of that, is a bookshelf speaker lying sideways. I can see
Beside the letter B. Oh, there it is.
There's the letter B, there's the little figure, and then there's a bookshelf speaker lying sideways.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. I see them now. They're just black boxes. That's got to be the 2 surround backs.
Oh, there's another one on the other side. I didn't even see that.
I see that one.
Beside the little bulldog there. There's his surround back speakers. They were there the whole time.
How they just unplug those and see how much of a difference you notice.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would just take your 5-channel amplifier and get rid of the other one and just be fine. Anyways, Eric. Eric has an older house. He's got a suspended ceiling in the basement, including in the media room where he has his home theater, and directly above that room is the dining room. The floor joists are 2x10s, and the house wasn't built with any subflooring. It's finished wood planks directly attached to the floor joists. I bet that's good for sound. He wants to add some rock wool insulation above his suspended ceiling. The standard bats are only 3.5 inches thick, so should he push them up with within the joist base so that they're touching the wood planks on the floor above, or should they be at the bottom of the joist, leaving an air gap above, or should they go in the middle of the joists, leaving an air gap both above and below the insulation? I think it kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve.
I mean, don't expect a gigantic soundproofing difference difference just by putting rock wool insulation in these joist bases. I mean, it will muffle voices a little bit, just like you would expect, but don't expect the bass whatsoever to really be significantly impacted by
I think if you're trying to get performance in the room that you're in, you want the gap to be behind.
Yeah, so I kind of just defer to Soundproofing Company on this. They have, diagrams of basically this setup. I mean, they're showing it with sound clips and hat channels suspending some drywall, but you've got a similar situation with your T-bar suspended ceiling. So they basically end up with just snug the bats of insulation to the bottoms of the joists. That means since you have a suspended ceiling, there's going to be a little bit of an air gap between the top of the suspended ceiling tiles and where the insulation actually is. But basically just, snug it into the bottom of the ceiling joists, and then there will be an air gap above that. Now, what they would recommend in a situation like yours, where you just have the one physical flooring layer above you, if you want some actual soundproofing that will have some impact to some lower frequencies and not just the upper vocal range, they would have you putting in some green glue and 1 or 2 layers of drywall that is like physically attached to that plank flooring above. They are beefing up the mass and the damping of the physical surface of the floor above you. That's the way that soundproofing company would come at this. That's still not going to be a perfect seal by any means, but it will at least dull the majority of the sounds coming up from your theater and leaking upstairs, much more than just the little bit of muffling of voices that the insulation alone will do.
No, I don't think as far as like within those bays where you put the insulation is going to make a big difference to the floor above.
Right, yeah.
I think it'll make more of a difference to the room that you're in. So, yes, I agree. Put the air gap behind, basically. Yep. Chad, since Dirac is now available for Denon Rant's newest models, which Dirac license makes the most sense to get? He's not going to like my answer. There's the limited bandwidth option for 259 that stops at 500 hertz, or the full bandwidth option for 349. Well, it makes sense to dip a toe in by starting with the limited bandwidth version. There's the option to upgrade to full bandwidth later if you for $99 if you want to, or should you just get the full bandwidth version right away and save $9? So you're already sold. You're already sold on this. And I would, again, point you to Andrew at AV Gadgets, who's got both of them and doesn't really want to use Dirac anymore. But he can't not use Dirac because he's stuck with it.
In his case, his alternative is AccuEQ, so we're not going to be switching to that. So Tom's real answer is just use the Odyssey XG32. Use the Odyssey.
And
didn't cost any extra.
I can't stress this enough. I know that I don't have any physical real world experience with this, and that that you could say, oh, Tom's just being whatever. And if you are the kind of person who really wants to tweak and do all that stuff, I mean, I could see you wanting this Dirac option.
Sure.
And if you're going to do that, then why would you even go with the limited bandwidth? I mean, the whole...
Yeah, I just get the full... If you're going to do it and you can afford the 350, I would just get the full bandwidth and not really question it. Because, I mean...
Why does it... So it stops... It only goes up to 500, only goes down to 500?
So, I mean, it's the base. It will EQ the base in the limited bandwidth. So it's 500 hertz and down.
Yeah.
That's what it'll EQ. And then it doesn't EQ anything above 500 hertz. I mean, I know there's arguments. People make arguments for in manually doing that for systems that are full range by default. But I'm like, if you want to play around with it, then you're only going to end up wondering, what would it do above 500?
Right.
That's what's if the point is to play around with this thing, it's an extra $100. Just get the full bandwidth version if you're going to do it. That would be my advice, because I think anybody who's doing it out of curiosity it's unavoidable. You're going to end up paying $9 more in the end. Why bother? Just get the full bandwidth version and go for it.
He says, is it pretty straightforward to add a house curve in Dirac? Does he need a tutorial or anything? My understanding about Dirac is that it needs a tutorial, full stop.
Overall,
it's not.
Sure.
It's not like Odyssey. You're used to Odyssey where you follow the on-screen instructions and you're done. And that's not the way Dirac is. Dirac isn't even level matching automatically.
Well, I mean, it does level match automatically, but not necessarily to reference volume.
Yeah.
As long as you get the first one manually set correctly, then the rest of the speakers will be level matched.
Andrew was very frustrated with that.
Yeah, honestly, the most difficult and frustrating part of Dirac is the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's where you could probably use a tutorial, and Andrew has talked about that, so you could use that as far as getting through the first part. In terms of setting your target curve, what you want the end result to be targeting, that is very easy. That is very straightforward. There's literally a graph on screen that says target curve, and you grab it with your mouse and move it to look the way you want it to look. Right. Like, that is very straightforward. So in terms of just setting what your target curve is and make that any house curve that you want it to be, I don't think that section needs a tutorial. Because like I say, if you can see a line on screen and grab it with a mouse and make it the shape you want. That's all you need to be able to do for a target curve.
Yeah. He already has a UMIC 1, but he got it about 4 years ago. Does it need to be recalibrated before he uses it with Dirac? Technically, every year.
Sure.
Every year it should be recalibrated. That's the recommendation from Cross Spectrum Labs.
Yeah.
Would I do that? I wouldn't do that. I would just go with it.
The UMIC ones are pretty darn stable microphones. Like if your business depends on delivering accurate results to your clients, I would have it recalibrated every year. Like, you're probably going to discover if you look at the 2 calibration files that there was virtually no difference from year to year, because the UMIC ones are very stable microphones. They don't like quickly degrade and change that type of stuff.
Did you spill water on it? Did you drop it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, hey, we are always happy to send people Cross Spectrum's way.
Yeah.
They're more than happy for you to mail your UMIC 1 to them, and they will absolutely give you a brand new, up-to-date, wonderful manual calibration of specifically your microphone. And I forget how much he charges for that. It's not ridiculous, because nothing Herb charges at Cross Spectrum is ridiculous in terms of price. I think it used to be like $70. Maybe it's $100 now, something like that. But, it's not a crazy amount of money. But my like true answer about how I personally feel about it is the UMIC 1s are pretty darn stable, and I wouldn't be very worried about it at all.
People are... And I say this as being one of those people. People are far too worried about the minutia in this hobby of ours. And in fact, I would argue every single hobby. People are like way too worried about the minutia. Like, oh my God, is my microphone out of calibration? You'll never hear it. You'll never hear it. And if you could, you would know. I would put it. I'll go that way. You would know when you get the measurements, and you're like, look at this drop, or look at this huge peak here. What is that coming from? I'm not hearing that in the room.
Yeah, I can play a sweep, and it's clearly not actually doing that. Yeah. Sure, yeah.
All right, Rob, who do we have left?
All right, on our list, we have Will, Galen, and Ron. I'm pretty sure that's it. Yep, that's it. Will, Galen, and Ron, you're first up next week.
All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 137 patrons over at patreon.com, including Alvin. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 137 patrons. Alvin, thank you for being one of them.
And we want to thank those who sent some notes in thanking us, including Dan, Joseph, Adam, Nick, Alvin, Will, and Ilango. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. I'll say the names one more time. Dan, Joseph, Adam, Nick, Alvin, Will, and Ilango. Thank you for your notes of encouragement. We very much appreciate it. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
That's right. If you want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.